So unfortunately, I was incorrect at the beginning of this video in saying that all of the, or both of the 350s are online. Unavailable. And black screen of death. So 2 out of the 4 are offline. And that one shows online and available in the app, which is clearly not. Well, 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 would you look what vehicle it is? Yes, this is the same exact Blazer EV RS that I drove back from Dallas just a few weeks ago here on the channel. And today I have the opportunity to do a charging curve test at my local Electrify America station. So that is exactly what is going to be the point or the subject matter of this video, because as we know and have seen in my previous videos and some of the other videos out there about the new Ultium platform vehicles from GM, including the Cadillac Lyriq and this Blazer, there may be a mysterious charging curve on these vehicles where it either overheats the battery and needs to slow way down and kind of drops off a cliff, or there's just something else going on between the equipment and the communication in the vehicle itself. So that's what we're gonna see in this video. I'm gonna head over to my local Electrify America station about 15-20 minutes away, hopefully arrive with less than 20% stated charge on the Blazer EV. I think it's about 24% as we see here, and just see what the curve is like from, 15% or so all the way up to 80-90%, and we'll see what the stopping point is going to be. But let's go ahead and head over there, drive over there, and just see how it acts and see how it does on a different Electrify America 350 kilowatt charger. So just to make sure I'm doing everything in my power possible to get this to charge at, its most efficient and quickest rate here in about 50-degree ambient exterior conditions, I'm gonna go ahead and activate the preconditioning here on the infotainment system. Now, I've actually never used this before here on GM vehicles, so we'll go to charging. Preconditioning temperature, I believe it's preset at 72 degrees, which should be fine. We'll go to fast charge prep. Start, and in progress. This process may take up to an hour. Expect a loss of range. You'll receive a notification once it is complete. So we're really going to try to burn up as much battery as possible. I know I'll get there with plenty of range left over, even if this doesn't finish. Oh, and another thing I quickly want to bring up is this vehicle is out of transport mode, so it is no longer in that transportation mode, and that is only deactivated with a dealer diagnostic tool, believe it or not, so you cannot do it from inside the vehicle. So I was not able to do that on my trip. Not that that makes any difference or not, but we will see in this video how the charging curve performs. But vehicle out of transportation mode, fast charge prep, preconditioning in progress. All right, so we have just arrived here. You might be familiar with this Electrify America station if you travel along Interstate 80 here in Western Illinois. This is the one in Geneseo. There's actually nobody here. As far as station up, that one's up. The 350s are both up, but the 150 down there, it says it's unavailable on the app. We'll have to go check that out in a second. But I'm here at the 350. I burned as much electricity that I thought was possible. Now, the preconditioning process still says it is in progress, which is a little bit unfortunate. I was yo-yoing this car, trying to just burn up the electricity, heat up the battery pack as best as possible, because I really didn't want to sit here just to wait for this to complete. I might sit here for just another minute or two to see if it happens to go ahead and complete. I think I'm just going to go ahead and send it here at 16-17% stated charge and see how it does. All right, looks like we are going on our first attempt to plug in, which is very good. As you can see, 16% on the thing, and we're quickly ramping up to 90, 100, 110, 20, 30, 40. All right. Awesome. Peak speeds here on the Blazer EV at 16%. 153 kilowatts. Awesome. So I'm going to move out of the way. Hopefully this time lapse will capture the exact curve from when I start charging to when I finish charging. But you can see we're actually doing peak speed, and I will go ahead and monitor it the entire way as well. But this is going to be hopefully a very good representation of what happens here with the charge curve on the new Blazer EV. Okay, so just to give you guys a 5-minute update, we are still ripping along at 143 kilowatts. We have gained just over, about 11% state of charge, and things are going very, very well thus far. but I'm interested to see what happens after the next 5 minutes, because I think that will definitely be the telltale sign as to what the peak charging curve does to the battery, and you know, how much it can sustain on a normal, you know, optimum charge curve. Okay, just hit the 10-minute mark of this session, and we are still buzzing along at 123 kilowatts. You can see we've gained about 22% of battery, just over 23 kilowatt hours. And again, everything seems to be going okay thus far. Speeds are starting to taper down, you know, about 30 kilowatts from our peak, but I wouldn't say that is the worst thing in the world. You know, still doing 120 some kilowatts at 40% state of charge seems pretty reasonable. But again, time will tell here in the next couple minutes whether or not it just drops off a cliff, or it, you know, sustains a, you know, longer charge session and we can keep these higher speeds up, because that is really what makes road tripping these vehicles just that much easier. Okay, so we just passed the 15-minute mark in the 50% state of charge. We're still pulling 116-ish kilowatt hours, if I can read that right. So this session seems to be going very, very well, which is interesting. I've not seen any major dip, but the one thing that makes me believe that maybe cooling is not an issue is, well, we have 46-degree ambient temperatures. So still over 100 kilowatts at 51% is probably the ideal curve, or, you know, what the vehicle is requesting at this point in time. So we'll have to see here if it ever drops off, or just kind of, you know, steadily goes down as the state of charge goes up. But I would say so far this appears to be a very ideal session. So unfortunately, I was incorrect at the beginning of this video in saying that all of the, or both of the 350s are online. As you can see, number 3 says available, unavailable, number 4 on the end, which is that one. We just had an EV6 owner pull up, and I feel kind of bad about this, but they had to use the CCS CHAdeMO unit because that was the only other one working besides number 2, which I'm currently on. So I'll go ahead and show you guys this. See, still doing 114 kilowatts, which is really good. But if we go over here to these 2 units, unavailable and black screen of death. So 2 out of the 4 are offline at this one, and this is a terrible occurrence, and it's quite frequent still, which is very, very unfortunate. So I apologize to the EV6 owner over there, because obviously they would get faster speeds on the one that I'm using, but this is for educational purposes. I'm only going to be here to about 80%, hopefully another 10-15 minutes tops, and I'll be gone. But I'm sure they'll get what they need by then in that time. But yeah, really unfortunate to see that 2 of the 4 are down. And that one shows online and available in the app, which is clearly not. Okay, so here just a couple minutes later, it looks like we have our first major decrease in output, down to 64 and dropping kilowatts at 61% state of charge, 21 minutes of charge time. It looks like it's continued to drop very, very slowly. So that is a little bit longer in time to see that major drop than when I was in Dallas, Texas, and some of the other tests done on the internet. But we might have the coolest ambient conditions, and there's another electric vehicle pulling up. Well, I got lucky with that, and the Audi e-tron owner actually did not need to charge. He just wanted to see what stations were like out here at this location. But anyways, about 5 minutes later after that last clip, 52 to 54 kilowatts looks like the speeds we're sitting at here at 66%. And hopefully the GoPro time lapse have been capturing the entire charge curve, so we can get a little bit better data. But I'd be interested to see if it actually picks back up. Looks like it actually is starting to creep back up near 60 here, 28 minutes into the session. So definitely really, really slow speeds here in the 60% threshold. But we'll have to see if it creeps back up at all. But man, these speeds are really Chevy Bolt level speeds at this point. So just about wrapping up at 35 minutes. I'll probably do one more update before the end of the session. Bouncing around right around 80 kilowatts, and have been for the last 4 or 5 minutes or so. So really no speed improvement here, around the 70 to 75% state of charge range. Looks like we're at 81. But yeah, what's interesting is I've been kind of watching the EV6 owner over here, and they are certainly pulling some decent speeds over there on the 150. And I've only been there for about 18 minutes or so, and looks like they plugged in very, very low state of charge. It says they only have 11 minutes to go till 80%. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here at 75%, and they are surely catching up in a quick time, just because of the speeds and the charge curve on those eGMP vehicles is so much better. All right, so just went ahead and quickly unplugged right at 80%. Station indicated 80, car indicated 81%, so there seems to be like some weird 1% difference in state of charge, communication between the two. But anyways, that took 39 minutes to complete. And again, I'll have to review all of the time-lapse footage and everything like that. But with 2 of the 4 stations being down, you can see the EV6 owner still plugged in. They were like 60% state of charge, and they plugged in at like 10 or something like that. So they were doing pretty good speeds on that 150 Chatamo CCS combination dispenser. But there was actually, I don't know if you guys can see it back there, a Tesla owner, which I assume had a CCS adapter, wanting to charge on this station. I know there's some Tesla superchargers not that far away in the Quad Cities. They are a little bit off of the interstate, so I guess this technically could be a little bit more convenient. Just have to see. I'll review the time lapse, and we'll go ahead and summarize this video here after this clip. Okay, so you joined me after I've edited most of this video and gone over the data, so I have my final opinions and thoughts. Now, before we get through this, I want to just mention that this is not an end-all be-all for the charging performance of the Blazer EV. We have a lot of time to gather more data from not only myself, but other reviewers out there, future owners of this vehicle and stuff like that. So I just want to put this out there. This is the preliminary findings, I would say, of this vehicle. Certainly a lot to go over, and I just don't want this to be the end-all be-all for your decision-making on whether or not you should buy the vehicle or not. So do your due diligence, wait for other reviewers out there if you're kind of on the fence about it, but certainly don't make this the end-all be-all for your decisions. So going over the data, my entire charge time was 39 minutes to go from 16 or 17%, depending on which one you look at, the machine or the vehicle, up to 80% state of charge. It took in 64 kilowatt hours of energy, and then once you add the starting state of charge of 16 or 17%, and then the final 20%, that puts you at a total gross capacity of right around 91 kilowatt hours, which seems fairly reasonable because, again, GM says the usable battery is 85 kilowatt hours. So with a buffer of 6 to 7 kilowatt hours, that certainly seems to line up and make sense. Now, going over the charging speeds, my peak speed observed was 156 kilowatts right after plugging in. I would say just about a minute or two, and it quickly started to taper down into the 140s and eventually to the 130s and 120s as well as we got near the 30 to 40% thresholds. Now, looking at the curve, you can actually see that I didn't experience any extreme dips shortly after plugging in, 10 to 15 minutes like I did down in Dallas, and what other reviewers have also experienced with the Ultium platform vehicles, such as that of the Lyriq. So when we start to take a look at the graph, you can see it was a relatively steady taper, starting in the mid 150s, 140s, 130s, kind of a normal step down to Route 119, where it steadied out for several minutes. And then when it got to 58 to 59% state of charge, that's where the biggest dip I did see in the entire charge session was, where it dipped to about 58 kilowatts. And then shortly after that, it did start to rebound up right around 80, held that for just a few minutes, and then it headed right back down once it hit 80% state of charge, which is a normal kind of charge limitation or charge drop-off that you see on many other EVs out there. 80% is typically a threshold where speeds go down quite significantly depending on the vehicle, either into the teens, sub 20. On the eGMP platform vehicles, it actually does quite well at top charging at, I think, well over like 40 kilowatts, even above 80%. So not sure where it would have went to with the Blazer if I would have left it plugged in for a few more minutes, but it did noticeably dip down right around 80%. Now, if you're curious about energy gained in a certain period of time, I'll go ahead and have that up on the screen. But in about 20 minutes, I was able to get up to 59% state of charge. In 30 minutes of charging, I was able to get up to 69% state of charge. So not the slowest thing in the world, but certainly not the fastest thing in the world in terms of gaining speeds, because as we know, eGMP platform vehicles or 800-volt architectures in general can recoup significant amounts of energy in just 20 minutes. And that is certainly not necessarily the case in the Blazer EV, but I wouldn't say it was the worst performance in the world either. So that is pretty much going to be all of the data that I have gathered and provided for you guys. And I guess my final thoughts and opinions on the Blazer EV are this. It's great that we didn't see any major dips like I saw in the first charging session I did down in Dallas, Texas. This vehicle could have received a software update while it was taken out of transport mode at the dealership. So just keep that in mind, as there may have been an update that had been installed at the dealer while taking it out of transport mode and going through the PDI process. But I have to say the performance in terms of charging seemed to be kind of average, middle of the road for a 400 volt architecture based vehicle, and fairly similar to the Mustang Mach-E, although I will say certain parts of the Blazer EV's charge curve was noticeably quicker, mainly at the beginning, and then towards the end it might have started to be a little bit similar, although I do know the Mach-E does taper quite heavily and quite slowly once especially get near the 80% or do exceed it, although they did update it in the future to where I think it maintains, 30 to 40 kilowatts for just a little bit longer than it did prior. And I guess the biggest issue or complaint I have about the Blazer EV is going to be the road trip ability. Now this pertains to the all-wheel drive version as seen in this video, not the upcoming rear-wheel drive, which has the larger battery pack from the Lyriq as well as the slightly faster peak charging speeds, which should change the overall performance and road trip capability. But in terms of the all-wheel drive version in specific, if we factor in overall efficiency and charge times, I think it's just going to be a little bit cumbersome to road trip as a whole. So going over some rough numbers, say you get 2.8 miles per kilowatt hour out on the interstates above 70 miles an hour, typical interstate speeds. On my trip, I saw 2.5 on the way back from Dallas, so I'm giving this vehicle kind of a benefit of the doubt situation and going with a slightly higher average because I think it is doable, although I'm not sure in, average conditions if you'll get 2.8 or not, but just giving it the benefit of doubt, let's say 2.8 on average. So if we assume that and charging up to 80% where you have the biggest threshold in the charging dips or the charging curves, that means you will be stopping at an EV charger every, 190 miles best case scenario if you're only using 80% of the battery. So if we say you sit at a DC fast charger from 10 to 80%, it takes 40 to 45 minutes to do so, and then you're only going to gain 180 to 190 miles of real world range on the interstate, again using 2.8 miles per kilowatt hour. To me, that's only about 2 to 2.5 hours of driving, again depending on the efficiency. So to me, when you start to look at the bigger picture and factor this together, you're driving for 2 to 2.5 hours on the interstate, stopping to DC fast charge for 40 to 45 minutes, assuming the charge curve doesn't get much better than this from 10 to 80%. You're going to take a while to cover some serious ground, even compared to other electric vehicles out there, namely the Tesla models, and the 800 volt architecture, EGMP, Taycan, Lucid, stuff like that. You're really kind of dragging on the road trip ability and you're dragging the timeline in which you're doing the road trip over a longer period of time. Now around town and all that, I'm sure this vehicle is fantastic. It's going to be much more efficient at slower speeds. It drives extremely nice. It's quiet, rides nice, stuff like that. But if you're doing a lot of road trips, I would say maybe you need to shy away from the Blazer EV. Now this is where it becomes interesting. Now when you take a look at the Cadillac Lyriq with the 102 kilowatt hour battery pack, which is substantially bigger than that of the 85 pack in the Blazer EV all-wheel drive, that is certified at over 300 miles of EPA estimated range. And if you take that same 2.8 miles per kilowatt hour efficiency, this pack alone could add 40 to 50 miles of range onto your interstate road trip, which to me adds about the perfect amount of time. You'll be pushing that 3 hours of driving mark before you need to stop and charge, unlike the Blazer EV, which may struggle to make even 2.5 hours. So essentially the upcoming Blazer EV rear-wheel drive with the larger battery pack, and I assume it'll be higher efficiency, might be the way to go if you're looking for a vehicle that could road trip a little bit better than the all-wheel drive version. Although at that point, you might be pushing the same price point than that of a Cadillac Lyriq, which will get you a much nicer interior, maybe a few more options and features. And I would say, subjective styling. I like both vehicles. I think they both look very nice. But you're certainly getting a much more premium vehicle at that point. So I think that's pretty much where I'm going to leave this video off. You guys have to let me know your thoughts and comments down below. Certainly interested to hear your thoughts on the charging curve, especially if you have a little bit more experience with the EVs in general, either from GM product or other manufacturers as well. because I don't personally have a lot of times in EVs, but I do understand the entire concept of, charging up to 80% and then moving on to the next charger. And I really just don't think the Blazer EV is going to be doing that extremely well compared to some of the other vehicles that are currently offered on the market. But you guys have to let me know your thoughts and comments down below. If you guys enjoyed this video and or found something helpful, make sure to hit that like button below. Subscribe if you guys haven't already, and make sure to check out my Dallas road trip video in this exact Blazer EV that I did just a few weeks ago. There's a lot of useful information, and again, these are all real world experiences that I have. Not doctored whatsoever, just want to give you guys the data, and you guys can decide for yourself whether you guys like it or not. Let me know if you guys have test driven or been hands-on with a Blazer EV quite yet. I know there's tons out there nationwide for EVs in general, so they're certainly becoming available en masse, and it doesn't seem like the adoption rate of them is too quick. So be interesting to see here over the next several months what happens with the Blazer EV, but more curious to hear your thoughts and opinions on the charge curve and the road trip capability. So let me know that down below. As always, I appreciate the support and hope to see you guys in the next one.